hung in the air like a fading echo, rippling across the scorched remains of what had once been the shining city of Gondolin. It was said that nothing of Gondolin remained but ash and ruin, its beauty and grandeur swallowed by the flames of betrayal. But those who walked among the ruins, those who dared to look deeper, felt a truth much darker than the city's fall. There was something more, something that had been consumed by the flames that no one could explain, something that lived in the heart of Gondolin's very creation. Gandalf stood before the broken gates of the city, his cloak billowing softly in the wind. The remnants of the city rose in jagged peaks around him, the fallen towers mere shadows of their former glory. His brow furrowed, eyes searching the rubble as though it might whisper its secrets to him. The city fell to flames. Yes, Gandalf murmured, his voice carrying a weight of sorrow. But there is more to Gondolin's end than we have been told, more than even the brave warriors of its defense could have known. Frodo stood by his side, watching the old wizard with a growing unease. The ruins seemed to tremble under the force of Gandalf's words, as if the city itself was not yet at rest. Is it the spirit of the city that haunts these walls? Frodo asked quietly, his voice laced with apprehension. Is it Morgoth's curse? No, Gandalf replied with a solemn shake of his head. It is something more insidious than that, something deeper. You see, it was not just the lives of Gondolin's people that were lost in that fire. It was not simply the city's beauty or its golden spires. What was truly destroyed in Gondolin was a mystery buried beneath the ashes. A shiver ran down Frodo's spine as he turned to face the ruins. The wind howled through the cracks in the stone, and the faintest sound seemed to rise from the earth itself, a whisper, a groan, as if the very land carried the burden of the truth Gandalf had spoken. The ruin of Gondolin is no mere tragedy, Gandalf continued, his voice low, almost as if speaking to himself. It was meant to be a sanctuary, hidden from Morgoth's gaze, but even in its beauty, it carried within it the seeds of a far greater evil. The city was never meant to fall in the way it did, and yet it was the fulfillment of a curse. The two companions moved deeper into the city's remains. The stone paths beneath their feet were cracked and worn, as if they had borne the weight of ages. Every corner they turned, every collapsed tower, whispered of a secret history, one that had been hidden from the world for far too long. I've seen this before, Gandalf muttered, bending down to inspect a fragment of an ancient artifact half buried in the rubble. It is written that Gondolin was a city of light, untouched by darkness. But that is not true. The shadow of Morgoth lingered here, even before the fire. His malice was woven into the very fabric of its creation. Frodo knelt beside him, peering at the artifact, his hand brushing the cool stone. It was a shard of something beautiful, an ornament, perhaps once part of the city's grand architecture. been marred by age, darkened by something foul. Are we to believe the evil here was greater than the fire itself? Frodo asked, his voice trembling slightly. What could be worse than the destruction of a city, the death of its people? More than death, Gandalf said gravely, standing and turning to face the elf. More than destruction. What was lost in Gondolin was not just life. It was the knowledge, the secrets, buried in the city's foundations. It was Morgoth's curse, not just upon its walls, but upon all who entered its borders. They walked deeper into the heart of the city, where the earth seemed to shift, and the air thickened. Something felt wrong, as if the very ground beneath them was holding its breath. There is something here, Gandalf whispered. Something ancient, waiting for the right moment to resurface. As they reached the remains of an old, forgotten chamber, hidden from the world above, the ground trembled beneath them. A deep, distant rumble echoed from the bowels of the city, as if the city itself were waking from a long, haunted sleep. The very stones groaned in protest, as though warning them to turn back. Gandalf reached out and placed his hand upon the doorframe of the chamber, his eyes closing in concentration. It was not just the physical ruin that befell Gondolin, he murmured. The destruction of the city, its fall, was only the surface. Beneath that, something far more dangerous was born. He stepped forward, pushing aside the remnants of the door, revealing a hidden chamber, untouched by the ravages of time. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, some familiar, some strange. They seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, glowing faintly in the darkness. The curse of Gondolin lies within these walls, Gandalf said, his voice filled with awe and fear. Morgoth's malice was buried here, even before the city was built. And what we now uncover, it is worse than any shadow he ever cast. Frodo stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. There, in the center of the room, lay a relic, an ancient artifact that radiated a faint, otherworldly glow. It was a relic of power, and as Frodo reached out to touch it, the chamber seemed to shudder once more, the ground trembling beneath them. The cost of Gondolin's fall was not just its people or its beauty. Gandalf's voice was heavy, filled with dread. It was the very essence of the city itself. What was lost here was not just a sanctuary from Morgoth's dark forces. It was the last hope of the elves to keep his shadow from spreading. The secrets of Gondolin were never meant to be found. Frodo's hand trembled as it hovered over the artifact. A terrible understanding gripped him. And now that curse has followed us. Gandalf's gaze darkened, and he nodded gravely. The darkness that Morgoth left in this world cannot be erased. It can only be buried, hidden, and forgotten. But there are some things that should never have been unearthed. With that, the chamber began to tremble violently, the symbols glowing brighter, as if reacting to their presence. The darkness had awakened, and the true cost of Gondolin's fall was becoming all too clear. The relic in the center of the room pulsed once, twice, before it shattered with an ear-splitting crack. The walls around them began to crumble, and the air grew thick with the stench of sulfur. Frodo could only look at Gandalf, his face pale with terror. The truth of Gondolin's fall was more than they had ever feared. It was a curse, a trap laid long ago by Morgoth, and now it was ready to be unleashed upon the world again. The journey through the ruins of Gondolin felt heavier with each passing step. The air was thick with the smell of old smoke, mixed with a faint sulfuric odor that clung to the stone. The once proud city had been reduced to little more than crumbling remnants. But beneath the desolation, there was an eerie presence, a lingering weight that pressed down on those who dared to walk through its depths. Gandalf's gaze was distant, his steps deliberate as he led the small group through the shattered gates and down the narrow, winding paths of the city. Frodo walked beside him, his brow furrowed, sensing the unease that had settled over them all. "There's something wrong here," Frodo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The air it feels." He paused, searching for the right words. "It feels as if the city itself is alive, watching us." Gandalf nodded grimly. "This place is more than just the remnants of a fallen city, Frodo. There are forces at work here that were never fully destroyed, no matter what the world believes." As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble faintly. At first, it was subtle, a vibration, almost imperceptible. But as they pressed on, the tremors grew stronger, and the walls around them seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. The sulfuric stench intensified, mingling with the faint smell of old fires and the unmistakable scent of decay. "Do you feel it?" Frodo asked, his voice tight with unease. "I do," Gandalf replied, his voice tinged with a hint of concern. "This is no natural tremor. Something is stirring beneath us. We must be cautious." The group moved in silence, their footsteps echoing off the stone as they reached the heart of the city, the remnants of a once grand hall, now reduced to rubble. The air grew warmer here, and the oppressive presence seemed to intensify, as if the very stone beneath their feet was aware of their intrusion. Gandalf paused, his eyes scanning the debris. "We've entered a part of the city that was hidden from even the most observant. The stories of Gondolin's fall have been told many times, but they don't tell the whole truth. The city's destruction wasn't just a matter of war. There were deeper forces at work here, forces that were tied to the city's very foundation." Frodo looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "There were things in Gondolin that were never meant to be uncovered," Gandalf said, his voice low, filled with the weight of ancient knowledge. "Not just the betrayal of Mieglin or the armies of Morgoth. There were darker powers, things that gnawed at the roots of Middle-earth itself, and they were bound to Gondolin, to its creation. The city's very existence was a form of, contained heavier as the words hung between them, the truth of Gandalf's statement sinking in. I've heard tales of Balrogs and the darkness Morgoth spread across the land, Frodo said, his voice barely audible. But this is something different, isn't it? Yes, Gandalf replied, his voice filled with sorrow. The Balrogs were but a fraction of Morgoth's malice. There are things older and more terrible than even the Balrogs. The nameless things, forces that slither in the dark places of the earth, beneath the very roots of the world. And Gondolin was not just a city of elves. It was a place built on lies and dark promises. Morgoth's touch lingers here still. Frodo shivered, the coldness in Gandalf's words sinking into his bones. The city, once a beacon of light and hope, was now a graveyard of forgotten secrets. The beauty of Gondolin, once so proud and untouchable, was now marred by an ancient and terrifying curse that had never truly been undone. As the group moved further into the ruins, flashes of the past began to haunt their steps. Frodo, despite himself, was drawn into a dreamlike vision, a fleeting glimpse of Gondolin's final moments. He saw the city, standing tall and proud, its white towers shining in the sunlight. He saw the elves, once full of life, fleeing in terror as flames consumed the city. And then, amidst the chaos, he saw Gothmog, the Balrog, his shadow looming over the city, his whip cracking through the air as it tore through the city's defenses. The sound of laughter echoed through the streets, a deep, rumbling laugh that sent chills down Frodo's spine. He saw the flames rising higher and higher, consuming everything in their path. And then the vision faded, leaving him gasping for air. He staggered, his heart racing. I saw it, Gondolin, the fire, the darkness, Gothmog's shadow. Gandalf turned to him, his face pale, his eyes filled with sorrow. The truth of Gondolin's fall is more than the death of its people. It was not just the fall of a city. It was the unraveling of a curse, the breaking of a seal that had kept something terrible at bay. As they continued deeper into the heart of the city, the group began to uncover more evidence of the city's dark history. In the remnants of an ancient library, they found texts, old, brittle scrolls that spoke of rituals, strange ceremonies conducted long before the city's fall. Some of the writings spoke of protection, of keeping the city hidden from Morgoth's gaze, but others spoke of things best left forgotten. The tension in the group grew with each new discovery. The clues they uncovered only deepened the mystery. Were these rituals meant to protect Gondolin, or were they something far darker? Were they intended to keep something buried, something that had been sealed away by the city's founders, something Morgoth had planted long before its destruction? We cannot ignore these signs, Gandalf said, his voice steady, but filled with an edge of urgency. The evil here is ancient, and it is tied to the city itself. If we do not uncover the truth, we may unwittingly release release something worse than we can imagine. The group exchanged uneasy glances. They were all driven by the need for truth, but each of them feared what that truth might cost them. "What do we do now?" Frodo asked, his voice filled with dread. Gandalf paused, his eyes scanning the ruined city. "We go deeper, into the heart of Gondolin. We must uncover what lies beneath. But we must proceed with caution. The dangers here are beyond our understanding." And so, with heavy hearts and minds filled with the weight of what they might uncover, the group prepared to descend into the very heart of Gondolin's ruins. They could not turn back now, not when the truth of the city's curse was so close, not when the shadow of Morgoth's lingering influence stretched long and dark over their path. But as they prepared to make their descent, a sense of foreboding hung over them all. What they were about to uncover would change everything. The city's fall had been only the beginning. The true evil of Gondolin had never been fully revealed. It had only been waiting, hidden in the depths, for the right moment to rise again. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of sulfur, and the faint, acrid taste of something ancient, something far older than the stone and dust of Gondolin. The walls around them seemed to hum with a hidden energy, as though the city's very bones were alive. The echoes of history whispered through the ruins, carrying with them secrets that had been buried for ages. Gandalf's steps slowed as he reached a darkened hall, his staff glowing faintly in the dim light. His eyes narrowed, scanning the long-forgotten corridors. "This place was never truly destroyed," he said quietly, more to himself than to the others. "The city fell, yes, but what was lost was more than just stone, more than just the lives of its people. There was something here that was meant to stay hidden, bound beneath the earth by powers that even Morgoth could not control." Frodo walked up beside him, feeling the weight of those words like a cold shiver down his spine. He had heard the stories of Gondolin's fall, the tragic loss, the betrayal, but he had never imagined that its true destruction lay deeper, beneath the surface of what the world had witnessed. "There's more to this city than we know, isn't there?" Frodo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Gandalf replied, "much more. And the forces at work here are far older than Morgoth's influence. It is not only the city that was destroyed. It is something far more dangerous, something that even the elves of Gondolin never fully understood." As they continued through the ruined city, the tremors beneath their feet grew stronger. It was as though the very earth was responding to their presence, stirring in its deep slumber. The faint rumblings seemed to echo from the shadows, a reminder of the hidden forces still active beneath the city. Strange markings, half buried in the stone, began to appear along the walls, symbols that glowed faintly with a sickly light. "Gandalf," Frodo murmured, his gaze fixed on one of the carvings. "What are these markings? They seem alive." "They are," Gandalf said, remnants of the ancient ritual that bound this city. Gondolin was built on the foundation of something far darker than the elves ever realized. A curse, if you will, that Morgoth left behind when he could not fully control it. These markings, these symbols, are a testament to that curse, an ancient power that was never truly destroyed. Frodo's mind raced, the weight of Gandalf's words sinking in. So the city wasn't just destroyed by war. It was destroyed by something more, primal. Gandalf nodded solemnly. Yes, there was something buried here, something far worse than any enemy Gondolin faced in battle. Morgoth's malice left a mark on this place, a lingering curse that was tied to the very foundation of the city. And when the city fell, that curse didn't die. It merely lay dormant, waiting. The tremors beneath their feet intensified, shaking the ground with increasing violence. The group quickened their pace, their eyes darting around in search of the source of the disturbance. A low, guttural sound echoed from deep within the earth, as if something was stirring beneath them. We need to move, Gandalf said, urgency creeping into his voice. The time has come. What lies beneath this city is waking. We must find the heart of the curse before it finds us. With determination, they pressed forward, descending deeper into the ruins. The air grew thicker, the heat rising with each step, until the very walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural warmth. It was as if the city's foundation had become a furnace, its very heart burning with an ancient fire. As they reached the deepest chamber, the source of the disturbance became clear. In the center of the room stood a throne of black stone, surrounded by intricate carvings and dark symbols that writhed in the dim light. Atop the throne lay an artifact, an ancient relic of terrible power. The air around it shimmered with a malevolent energy, its presence undeniable. The heart of Gondolin's curse, Gandalf murmured. It was always here, buried beneath the city's beauty. This relic, this power, is the true reason Gondolin fell. It was not just the armies of Morgoth. It was the ancient evil bound within the city itself. The group approached cautiously, the air growing heavier with each step. As they neared the throne, a sudden flash of light illuminated the chamber, and the temperature spiked. A dark shadow began to emerge from the throne, coalescing into a tangible form. The shadow twisted and writhed, taking shape, a hulking, fiery figure, its eyes glowing with an ancient malice. The Balrog. It was Gothmog. The creature loomed before them, its fiery wings unfurled, casting a dim light over the chamber. The very ground trembled beneath its weight, and the air grew thick with the stench of sulfur. It was as if the very earth was boiling beneath them. You have awakened me, Gothmog's voice boomed, deep and guttural, reverberating through the chamber. Fools, you have unleashed what was meant to remain buried forever. The group staggered back, their faces filled with terror as the Balrog's presence filled the room. Gandalf stepped forward, his staff raised, overwhelming heat from the creature's form caused the air to shimmer in the distance. Gondolin's fall was never complete, Gandalf said, his voice rising above the roar of the creature. This city was a prison, holding something far more dangerous than you ever realized. Morgoth's curse was never fully broken. Gothmog's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound that shook the very walls. You think you can stop me? You think you can undo what was set into motion long ago? I am the shadow of Morgoth. I am the fire that never dies. And now you will perish in the flames of Gondolin's true legacy. The ground beneath their feet began to crack, and the chamber trembled violently. The very stone walls seemed to bend and warp as the Balrog's power surged. We must destroy it, Gandalf shouted. We cannot let it rise again. As the Balrog advanced, its fiery whip crackling through the air, the group began to fight back, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. Shadows twisted around them, pulling them deeper into the darkness. It was clear that this battle was not just for their lives, it was for the fate of Middle-earth itself. With a final, desperate effort, Gandalf raised his staff, channeling all his power into a single, blinding burst of light. The chamber exploded with a deafening roar as the Balrog let out a final scream before vanishing into the abyss. For a moment, there was silence. The trembling of the earth ceased, and the air cooled, but the darkness of Gondolin's curse still lingered in the air, a reminder of the evil that had been unleashed. As the group made their way out of the chamber, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear, Gandalf looked back at the ruins of the city. The destruction of Gondolin had not been its final fall. The city had been built on the foundation of a curse, and that curse was still waiting, still lingering in the shadows of Middle-earth. Some truths are meant to remain hidden, Gandalf said quietly, his voice filled with sorrow. But in seeking them, we may have unleashed something we can never undo. The earth trembled beneath their feet once more, and the stars above seemed to dim, as if they, too, felt the weight of the evil that had been set free. The world had changed. The legacy of Gondolin was far from over, and its